Thank you very much, Mr. Lineback. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Hope everyone had a good week. I think it was a pretty good week, even though it seems a little drizzly out now, but otherwise, I think we've had some wonderful weather to get outside, and apparently everyone is barbecuing or grilling, so if you have one, it's nice to be able to go outside and do that sort of thing as well during the summer months. What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do for a living? What are your goals in life? And where do you see yourself in the next 10, 20, or 30 years? These questions may sound familiar to some of you. At various points in life, we all come to a point where we need to figure out what we're going to do with our time. When you grow up and become an adult, for example, you might need to figure out how you're going to earn a living, be that to start a job or continue with your education that you might need for a particular occupation down the road. Within your field of work, you may be presented with multiple different opportunities, and while they may be broadly similar, the positions themselves may impact your day-to-day life in vastly different ways. Now, these kinds of decisions can feel quite momentous, but in many ways, we also make major decisions like these in the way that we build our habits and how we invest our time each and every day. We can choose to invest time in different hobbies or skills and relationships that will permanently shape our experiences and the overall story of our lives. What really complicates decision making is that we can't do everything that we might want to do. Taking some opportunities can exclude you from taking others. Investing more time into one skill means you might be worse at everything else that you didn't invest time into. So as hard as it may be, we have to figure out what is the most important thing for us and prioritize those time investments and opportunities over others. Given that we have a limited number of years in our physical lives, it's just part of life that we have to make these kind of difficult choices more often than we really might want to. On top of this, the world that we live in provides us with far too many opportunities and possibilities to choose from. And so while having options is nice and gives us the choices of various different things, there's almost an overwhelming, or I would say there is an overwhelming number of possibilities available to us, and these can quickly turn into distractions that keep us from properly focusing on our real priorities. So in facing down so many possibilities and decisions that can impact the rest of our lives, it's pretty natural and likely necessary to seek some kind of advice from others, be that family, friends, or other trusted sources to help us think over these decisions and make the choice that best aligns with our priorities. However, in order to think about what options best align with our priorities, we actually need to figure out what our priorities are. What should our priorities be as Christians? How should we think about setting our priorities so we can lead successful lives and follow God? For this kind of advice, I think we can gain some really relevant insights from the writings of King Solomon. Now, King Solomon, I believe, was by far the most successful king in Israel. He was both wise and very intelligent, but he was also wealthy and wielded great authority in his time. King Solomon's writings contain some unique and powerful insights into the best ways that men can prioritize their time on earth, as not only was he able to describe wisdom from his own position of success at various times, but he was also in a position that he could analyze the lives of many other people and see what did or didn't work out for them. So what does Solomon have to say on what we should be doing with our lives? How does he think we should prioritize the many different activities and goals we might pursue with our time on earth? What advice does Solomon have for us with regard to what we should do? Well, we don't have to look too long or too hard to get Solomon's high-level summary, which he provides at the beginning of the book of Ecclesiastes. So let's turn over to Ecclesiastes 1, and we'll start in verses 1 and 2. Now, it's not explicit that Solomon wrote this. As we see in the beginning, it says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. But based on the description in the book of Ecclesiastes, we're pretty sure of Solomon. There's not a lot of other people who fit the description of his success and his particular position and lineage. So, Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. At first glance, it seems that at the time that Solomon wrote this later in his life, it seems like he doesn't think that anything matters. The pursuit of anything is just kind of vain. That doesn't immediately seem like very encouraging or helpful to somebody if they're trying to figure out some kind of major life decision or how they should navigate the next big thing that they're facing in life. Now, I assure you that I actually think it is an incredibly encouraging statement and a useful idea to remember when navigating life, but to discover why, we need to dive a little bit deeper. What does Solomon mean by calling everything vanity? What does it mean for everything to be vain? Solomon uses the word vanity and vain many times throughout the course of this book, so it's pretty important to have a precise definition of what he means. Here, the word for vanity literally means, the Hebrew word literally means a vapor or a breath. And so it's used metaphorically to represent something that's extremely fleeting or kind of transient or ephemeral, something that just passes by quickly, and in particular, something lacking in substance, something empty and ultimately unsatisfying. Using this definition of vanity, we can interpret Solomon's opening in Ecclesiastes is everything is temporary or everything is fleeting and ultimately empty. Still doesn't quite sound encouraging yet, but let's keep going. Throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon addresses effectively all the major concerns and desires that men could have about their physical lives. Position, possessions, popularity, just to name a few things. And he declares them all as vain. In other words, Solomon declares that everything that any of us has done or will do has been probably done before and has the same vain or fleeting and unsatisfying outcome. In my New King James Version of the Bible, the translators have added some headings throughout the various sections of Solomon's discourse here, and the topics that Solomon discusses include some of the following things. The vanity of pleasure. Injustice seems to prevail. The uselessness and vanity of selfish toil. Popularity passes away. The vanity of gain and honor, and death comes to all. Still doesn't sound encouraging, but we'll keep going. In short, Solomon's message is that many of man's major desires in life are ultimately not satisfying if they are achieved. Furthermore, even our aspirations of achieving them can be fleeting due to time and circumstance, as Solomon states in Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 11. In Ecclesiastes 9 verse 11, Solomon says, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. Our pursuits can be vain, both in the sense that our efforts can be in vain, meaning that they don't pay off, and also in the sense that they are temporary and unsatisfying to us in the long term, as they pass away like all other physical things. Why are all these things so vain to us? Why are they ultimately not satisfying? We understand how temporary life and the things around us are, as all things that we interact with have some beginning and will have some end. However, we are made in the image of the eternal God and have a spirit in us that longs for something beyond this physical life. And Solomon records this observation over in Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 11. Ecclesiastes 3:11 states, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end." Deep down, we all long for some kind of meaning in our lives, but we want something that lasts. For example, there are many people who want to be famous or have a legacy or be well known for something. But even if this goal is achieved, the legacy and fame can be forgotten, tarnished, or misinterpreted. Instead, the kind of meaning that we long for must be something eternal, as everything that we can do, quote, under the sun, as Solomon states, is just temporary and vain. If we can find something to pursue that will last, that will be eternal, we should make it our number one priority, as everything else that Solomon has appropriately labeled as, quote, vain, doesn't matter in comparison. So what can we pursue in our lives that will actually last? Solomon provides an answer to this question at the conclusion of the book of Ecclesiastes. And in answering this question, provides us with some timeless guidance on how we should prioritize our lives, regardless of what era we live in. And we can look at this answer over in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verses 6 and 7. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 6, "Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." Even after our physical lives end, our spirit will not be destroyed. We know from other scriptures that our spirit returns to God, dormant, until the resurrection to eternal spiritual life. The thing that is eternal, therefore, is our relationship with God, the character we build, and the start of our relationships with other members of God's eternal family during this physical life, all of which will be deepened over the course of eternity. Therefore, we need to prioritize our spiritual growth and development, drawing closer to God and following His ways, as the results of this effort will last and not be temporary or, quote, vain, like many of the other things Solomon discusses in his book, in the Bible here. Ultimately, even though Solomon sounds a bit nihilistic, like nothing matters, at the beginning of this book of Ecclesiastes, the message of Ecclesiastes, I think, is very encouraging. While there's a lot we can do and enjoy in this life, it's all ultimately temporary and shouldn't be our highest priority. And that is a great thing. This world, in its current form, without God's rulership, is imperfect and unfair. So if our goal was to be successful by some physical metric alone, by what we achieved in this life, we would feel devastated when something didn't go our way or when we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve. Rather, the work set out for us to focus on first and foremost is our spiritual growth, which will yield eternal rewards for us instead. Now, like many aspects of wisdom that Solomon discusses in the book of Proverbs and in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a little bit of nuance here. Solomon isn't recommending we completely ignore the idea of having career goals or other long-term physical goals, and he provides plenty of practical advice on being hardworking and diligent in this life. Furthermore, he encourages us to enjoy our physical lives and enjoy what we earn and achieve, as he describes in Ecclesiastes 5 and verses 18 through 20. Ecclesiastes 5, 18 through 20, starting in verse 18, he says, "Here is what I have seen. It is good and fitting for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which God gives him, for it is his heritage. As for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, and given him power to eat of it, to receive his heritage and rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he will not dwell unduly on the days of his life, because God keeps him busy with the joy of his heart." We should enjoy the various opportunities and physical rewards that we strive for and earn throughout our life. God has blessed us with these things, and He wants us to enjoy them. However, they are just not our number one priority. Our relationship with God, however, should be that number one priority. So I want to conclude my message today by reading Solomon's conclusion of this topic, which he presents over in Ecclesiastes 12 and verses 13 and 14, the last two chapters in the book. Ecclesiastes 12, verses 13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Following God's law and building a relationship with Him should be our top priority, as unlike other physical things, it is not temporary or vain, as Solomon often writes in this book. I believe that keeping this in mind and remembering that our physical endeavors are less important is extremely encouraging. While we may encounter hardships and miss out on opportunities in this life and feel upset about those things, we can always make progress on the one real thing that matters and lasts, our spiritual growth and relationship with God. With that in mind, even if our physical endeavors face some obstacle and face obstacle after obstacle, we can still achieve great eternal success by focusing on that number one priority. In a world where so much can go wrong and so much is out of our control, that's a really comforting thing to remember, because no matter what else is going on around us, we can take control of our spiritual growth and rely on God. Prioritize God. Don't worry about the other stuff so much. It's all vanity anyways.